My name is Heather Miller, and at 34 years old, I went from being treated like a servant in my husband's wealthy family to becoming their worst nightmare. When I married James Anderson, I thought I was gaining a family, not becoming their maid. The moment everything changed was during our annual vacation at Blue Diamond Resort, when my mother-in-law Patricia looked at me and said, "The help doesn't eat with family." That night, I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been underestimated. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where everyone knew everyone's business. My parents owned a modest diner called Miller's Home Cooking that barely kept our family afloat. From age 14, I was waiting tables, washing dishes, and learning the value of hard work. My hands were always rough from hot water and cleaning solutions, something Patricia would later point out with thinly veiled disgust. High school wasn't easy for me. While other girls went to football games and dances, I worked double shifts to help my parents pay the bills. I maintained straight A's despite my schedule, determined that education would be my ticket to something better. My senior year, I watched my classmates apply to prestigious universities while I applied for scholarships to the state college. I was accepted to Ohio State with partial financial aid, but it wasn't enough. So I juggled 3 jobs: barista in the morning, library assistant during the day, and bartending at night. I lived on coffee and determination, studying business management between shifts. My roommate Kimberly Turner often told me I was killing myself, but I knew what I wanted: financial independence and the security my parents never had. During my senior year, I landed an internship at a local marketing firm. The experience was invaluable, but the connections I made were what truly changed my life. The firm handled a charity gala for the Children's Hospital Foundation, and I volunteered to help with the event setup. That's where I met James Anderson. He wasn't like the other wealthy attendees in their designer tuxedos who looked through the staff as if we were invisible. James stopped to help me when I dropped a tray of champagne glasses. Instead of making me feel worse about the accident, he knelt down in his $1,000 suit and helped me clean up. "These things happen," he said with a genuine smile. "I'm James, by the way." Our conversation that night flowed effortlessly. James was intrigued by my work ethic and ambition. I was charmed by his humility and the way he listened, really listened, when I spoke. He asked for my number, and I hesitated, knowing we came from different worlds. "Just coffee," he promised. "I want to hear more about your business ideas." One coffee date turned into dinner, which turned into weekend outings. James was fifth-generation wealth. His family owned Anderson Investment Group, managing billions in assets. He'd attended Phillips Exeter Academy and then Harvard, and was expected to take over the family business eventually. But there was something about him that seemed trapped by these expectations. "You're the first real person I've met in years," he told me one night as we walked along the river. "Everyone in my world is playing a role, including me sometimes." After 6 months of dating, James proposed. I said yes, but my stomach knotted with anxiety about meeting his family. When the day came, Patricia Anderson greeted me with a clinical once-over and an air kiss that didn't come within 6 inches of my cheek. "So this is the girl who's captured our James," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. How refreshing. Robert Anderson, James's father, was more direct. During a private moment, he mentioned a prenuptial agreement within the first 5 minutes of meeting me. "No offense, but the Anderson fortune has been built over generations. We need to protect it," he said, swirling his scotch. "I'm sure you understand." I did understand, and I signed the papers without complaint. I wasn't after James's money. I had plans to build my own success. What I didn't understand was that the prenup was just the beginning of their attempts to remind me that I wasn't truly one of them. Our wedding was smaller than the Andersons wanted. Patricia had pushed for 500 guests at the Plaza in New York, but I insisted on something more intimate. We compromised with 150 guests at the Anderson estate. Patricia scrutinized every decision from the flowers to the font on the invitations. "Navy blue napkins? With that tablecloth? Oh dear," she would say, then call the wedding planner to change my selections when she thought I wasn't listening. After the wedding, James and I moved into what his parents called a starter home, a 4-bedroom colonial in an exclusive neighborhood that cost more than my parents would earn in 20 years. I was overwhelmed by the space, but determined to make it ours. Meanwhile, I had started my own business selling handcrafted jewelry online. I'd always been creative, making pieces from vintage materials and semi-precious stones. At first, it was just a side project, something that was wholly mine in a world where I increasingly felt like an imposter. Our first Thanksgiving as a married couple was at the Anderson estate, a sprawling mansion with staff who moved silently through the rooms, anticipating needs before they were voiced. I offered to help in the kitchen, which Patricia found amusing. "How sweet," she said. "But Maggie has been with us for 20 years. She doesn't need assistance." Throughout dinner, Elizabeth, James's sister, corrected my table manners with subtle gestures, moving my water glass to the right spot, widening her eyes when I used the wrong fork. William, James's brother, asked if people in my hometown ate anything besides casseroles and meatloaf. "Well, that's enough," James said, but he was laughing too. I tried to win them over. I read books on wine to contribute to Robert's discussions on his collection. I researched the artists Patricia mentioned to keep up with her commentary on the latest gallery openings. I dressed in clothes that strained my personal budget, but might meet with their approval. None of it made a difference. In their eyes, I remained an outsider, tolerated for James's sake, but never truly accepted. The holiday season that first year was when the cracks in my marriage began to show. The Andersons had traditions that went back generations, specific ornaments that had to be placed in precise locations on the Christmas tree, certain foods that must be served, even a rigid schedule of which events to attend. When I suggested adding just one tradition for my family, my grandmother's special cinnamon rolls on Christmas morning, Elizabeth looked horrified. "But we always have Maggie's poached eggs and smoked salmon," she said. "It's an Anderson tradition." "We could have both," I suggested. "I don't think so," Patricia intervened. "Too many carbs before the Hendersons' brunch. Perhaps another time, dear." There would never be another time. Every suggestion I made was politely but firmly rejected. Elizabeth took it upon herself to help me navigate Anderson family life. She corrected everything from how I pronounced certain words to how I arranged flowers in a vase. "The salad fork goes on the outside, Heather," she explained for the third time, repositioning my careful table setting. "And these napkins should be pressed again. See these creases." William was less subtle. His jokes about my quaint upbringing became a regular feature at family gatherings. "Remember that time Heather asked if the Rothko in Dad's study was new?" he hooted during a dinner party. "It's only been there since before we were born." James would squeeze my hand under the table, but rarely defended me publicly. "They don't mean anything by it," he would say later. "It's just their way." The real turning point came when Patricia visited our home for the first time. I had spent days preparing, cleaning every corner, arranging fresh flowers, planning a menu I thought she would approve of. Within minutes of her arrival, she was rearranging my furniture, opening windows because there's a stuffiness, and questioning my choice of dishware. "These plates are very colorful," she said, holding one of my hand-painted dishes at arm's length. "Did you get them at that discount store?" "They're handmade by an artist I found online," I explained. "Well, perhaps for everyday use they're fine. I'll send over some of the Wedgwood collection for when you entertain." That evening, we hosted a small dinner with some of James's colleagues from the firm. I was in the kitchen plating dessert when one of the women wandered in looking for the bathroom. She glanced at me, surrounded by dishes and wearing an apron to protect my dress. "Another gin and tonic when you have a moment," she said, not making eye contact. Light on the tonic. The assumption that I was the hired help stung, but what hurt more was James's reaction when I told him about it later. "Margaret probably couldn't see well without her contacts," he laughed. "Take it as a compliment. You looked professional handling everything so smoothly." As months passed, James spent more time at the family firm and less time with me. When we were together, conversations about his family's behavior turned into arguments. "You're too sensitive," he would say. "That's just how they talk to everyone." But I knew that wasn't true. I heard how they spoke to people they respected, and it was nothing like how they spoke to me. My business was the one bright spot during this time. I had secured a small feature in a regional magazine, and orders were steadily increasing. I expanded my collection and hired a part-time assistant, Ashley Cooper, who quickly became my confidant. "You know they're intimidated by you, right?" Ashley said one day, as we packaged orders. "You built something from nothing." They've just inherited everything. I wasn't sure that was true, but Ashley's unwavering support gave me strength. When I shared stories of Patricia's latest cutting remark or Elizabeth's backhanded compliment, Ashley encouraged me to stand my ground. You don't need their approval, she reminded me. You're a Miller before you're an Anderson. I try to hold on to that truth, but it was difficult when every family dinner became an exercise in restraint. The night I told them about my magazine feature, Patricia nodded absently. How nice for your little hobby, she said. James, tell everyone about your new client. What was it, a $50 million portfolio? James beamed under his mother's approval, and my accomplishment was forgotten. I tried one last strategy to win their acceptance. I took etiquette classes, secretly studying proper behavior for every possible social situation. I bought designer clothes I couldn't afford, maxing out credit cards to look the part of an Anderson wife. I practiced my posture, my diction, even the way I held my wine glass. The next time Patricia saw me, she raised an eyebrow. Well, you're almost presentable now, she said, adjusting my collar. Still, there's something about breeding that can't be taught. That night, I cried myself to sleep while James worked late at the office. I was losing myself in the effort to be someone the Andersons would accept, and it still wasn't enough. Meanwhile, my marriage was becoming a hollow performance, both of us playing roles instead of being partners. 3 years into our marriage, my jewelry business had grown beyond my wildest expectations. I had been featured in several national magazines, had a waiting list for custom pieces, and had expanded to a small studio space with 3 employees. The income wasn't Anderson-level wealth, but it was substantial enough that I no longer touched the allowance James had set up for me when we married. None of this seemed to register with the Anderson family. At Sunday dinners, they still referred to my work as that crafting thing, or Heather's hobby. When I tried to discuss business strategies or growth metrics, eyes would glaze over, and the conversation would quickly shift to Anderson Investment Group's latest acquisition. Summer approached, and with it, the annual Anderson family vacation at Blue Diamond Resort, an exclusive retreat on a private island in the Caribbean. The resort catered to the ultra-wealthy, with villas starting at $10,000 per night and amenities that included personal butlers, private chefs, and yacht access. 2 weeks before our departure, Patricia sent me an email with the subject line, Appropriate Attire Guidelines. Attached was a detailed spreadsheet outlining suitable clothing for each activity, complete with links to recommended brands and notes on what colors photographed well for their annual family portrait. I've taken the liberty of scheduling a personal shopper appointment for you, the email concluded. The Anderson name carries weight at Blue Diamond, and we must all represent the family appropriately. I showed the email to Ashley during our lunch break. She nearly choked on her sandwich. Is she serious? You're a grown woman, not a mannequin they get to dress up, Ashley said, scrolling through the spreadsheet. And look at these prices. $600 for a beach cover-up. I shrugged, trying to seem unbothered though the email had kept me awake half the night. It's important to James that this vacation goes well. His father is announcing restructuring at the firm, and James is hoping for a bigger role. Ashley gave me a look I'd come to recognize, part pity, part exasperation. And what about what's important to you? When was the last time any of them came to one of your trunk shows or asked about your business goals? She was right, but I wasn't ready to face what that meant for my marriage. The day we arrived at Blue Diamond Resort, I understood why the Andersons returned year after year. The beauty was breathtaking, crystal clear water, white sand beaches, and lush tropical landscaping. Staff members greeted the family by name, remembering details from previous visits. Mr. Anderson, we've stocked your villa with the Macallan 25 you prefer, the manager said, leading us to a golf cart. And Mrs. Anderson, Chef Maurice has planned a special menu incorporating the dietary preferences you noted last year. No one introduced me, and I didn't correct the staff member who referred to Elizabeth as Mrs. Anderson while handing out welcome cocktails. I was invisible, not quite family, not quite staff, in a strange limbo of my own. The Anderson villa was spectacular, 6 bedrooms surrounding a private infinity pool with panoramic ocean views. I noticed immediately that James and I had been assigned the smallest bedroom, tucked away at the far end of the villa, while Elizabeth and her husband Maxwell had the second master suite despite being the youngest couple. As everyone dispersed to change for the beach, Patricia touched my arm. Heather, Would you mind seeing to everyone's unpacking? The staff here does a decent job, but they never get Robert's shirts hung properly, and Elizabeth needs her skincare items arranged just so. It wasn't a request. Before I could respond, Patricia was heading to the pool, calling over her shoulder. Our dinner reservation is at 7. Casual, elegant attire. James had already left with William and Maxwell for an impromptu golf game, not noticing my absence or Patricia's instructions. I stood alone in the entryway, surrounded by luxury luggage, feeling more like staff than I ever had before. 3 hours later, I had unpacked 6 suitcases, carefully arranging clothes according to unspoken expectations. My own suitcase remained untouched in our room. When I finally made it to the beach, the family was returning for afternoon tea. "There you are," James said, kissing my cheek. "We wondered where you disappeared to." I bit back a response about where he thought his pressed linen shirts had come from. Instead, I plastered on a smile and joined them for tea, where the conversation revolved around the exceptional golf course and plans for tomorrow's yacht excursion. Dinner that night was at the resort's signature restaurant. I had rushed to shower and change, selecting an outfit from Patricia's approved list, a navy silk dress that had cost a month's profit from my business. As we were seated at the best table in the restaurant, I tried to join the conversation about the market outlook for tech stocks. "Actually, I've been reading about innovative startups in sustainable," I began. "Darling, could you ask for more bread?" Robert interrupted, not even glancing in my direction. "And perhaps another bottle of the Montrachet." Throughout the meal, I was interrupted, talked over, or simply ignored. When I mentioned that my newest collection had been picked up by a major department store, news I'd been saving to share in person, Elizabeth changed the subject to her charity committee's latest fundraiser before I could even finish my sentence. The real highlight of the evening came when Robert announced that James would be heading a new division at the firm focused on emerging markets. "A significant responsibility," Robert declared, raising his glass. "But my son has proven himself capable of carrying the Anderson legacy forward." Everyone toasted James's success. No one mentioned that the major department store deal meant I'd need to hire 5 more employees and expand production significantly. The milestone I'd worked toward for years was less important than James getting a promotion at the family company he'd been handed a role in. I excused myself before dessert, claiming a headache. No one noticed when I didn't return. Walking along the beach in the moonlight, I allowed myself to cry, really cry for the first time in years. The warm breeze carried away my tears as I questioned every decision that had led me to this point. I loved James, but was love enough when it came with this constant belittlement? The ocean at night always puts things in perspective, doesn't it? I turned to find a woman in her 50s sitting on one of the beach loungers, a glass of wine in her hand. I quickly wiped my tears, embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable moment. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize anyone was here," I said, turning to leave. "Please don't go on my account," she said.
"I'm Sofa Grant."
And based on that exit from the restaurant, I'd say you could use a friendly ear. Something about her direct approach disarmed me. I sat in the lounger beside her, and before I knew it, I was telling this stranger about the past 3 years of subtle humiliations and mounting frustrations. Sophia listened without interruption, occasionally nodding in understanding. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "I recognized the Andersons from previous seasons," she finally said. "Old money, old attitudes. I've encountered plenty of families like them in my career." "What do you do?" I asked, realizing I'd unloaded my life story without learning anything about her. "I run a venture capital firm specializing in female-founded businesses," Sophia said. "Started it after my own disastrous marriage to a man whose family treated me as an accessory rather than a partner." Over the next hour, Sophia shared her own journey from corporate lawyer to entrepreneur. She'd built her company from scratch after her divorce, specifically to fund women who had viable business ideas but lacked the connections or resources to secure traditional investment. "Your jewelry line sounds promising," she said. "Have you considered scaling up more aggressively? With the right investment and strategy, you could be a national brand within 2 years." For the first time in days, I felt seen, not as James's inappropriate wife or the Anderson family charity case, but as a businesswoman with genuine potential. Sophia's questions about my business model, production capacity, and growth strategy were incisive and respectful. Before we parted ways, Sophia handed me her card. "I'm here for the week. Let's meet for coffee tomorrow and discuss your business plan in more detail. That night, when James finally came to bed, I was still awake, mind racing with possibilities Sophia had helped me see. Everything okay? He asked, loosening his tie. You disappeared from dinner. Would you have noticed if your mother hadn't pointed it out? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. James sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. That's not fair, Heather. It was an important night for me. They're all important nights for you, I said. But what about my news? The department store deal is going to transform my business, and no one at that table cared enough to even acknowledge it. You know how they are about your jewelry thing, he said dismissively. They don't understand creative businesses. It's not a thing, James. It's a company. My company. And it's growing faster than your family bothers to notice because they're too busy treating me like I'm the help. James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as frustration. That's an exaggeration. They're just set in their ways. Your mother asked me to unpack everyone's luggage today, like a maid. And you didn't even notice I was missing for 3 hours. She was probably just trying to include you, James said weakly. You know, giving you something to do. In that moment, I realized James would always choose the path of least resistance, making excuses for his family rather than standing up for his wife. The revelation hurt worse than any cutting remark Patricia had ever made. I'm meeting with an investor tomorrow, I said, changing the subject. A woman I met tonight who's interested in helping me scale the business. James looked surprised, then relieved at the change in topic. That sounds great, honey. Just be careful about getting into agreements without having our family lawyers review everything. Our family lawyers. As if I was welcome to those resources when it suited the Andersons, but not welcome at their dinner table as an equal. I turned away, pretending to sleep, but my mind was racing. Throughout the night, I thought about Sophia's insights and her own journey. By morning, I had made a decision. I would no longer diminish myself to make the Andersons comfortable. Whatever happened with my marriage, I would not sacrifice my dignity or potential any longer. Over the next few days, I met with Sophia several times, developing a comprehensive business growth strategy. During one of our conversations, she mentioned something that caught my attention. It's ironic, she said, sipping her espresso. Everyone thinks Blue Diamond Resort is the epitome of success, but they're actually struggling financially. Poor management, overextension into new properties without sufficient capital. The investment group I sit on the board of has been approached about a potential acquisition. The information lodged in my mind, a seed that would soon grow into something unexpected. The last evening of our vacation arrived, and despite the revelations and decisions of the previous days, I was determined to make one final effort. Not to win the Andersons' approval, I no longer needed that, but to clarify exactly where I stood with his family. I spent the day preparing a special dinner in our villa. The resort's executive chef had been reluctant at first when I asked to use the kitchen myself, but a generous tip and my genuine interest in his techniques had won him over. Together, we planned a menu showcasing the best local ingredients: conch ceviche, spiny lobster with mango salsa, and a passion fruit pavlova for dessert. All afternoon, I worked alongside the chef, learning his methods while also adding my own touches. The dining area of the villa was transformed with flowers, candles, and the fine linens I found in a cabinet. I wanted everything to be perfect, not to impress the Andersons, but to prove something to myself. Patricia wandered into the kitchen several times, making small comments that gradually escalated in their criticism. I'm not sure Robert will eat something so experimental, she said, eyeing the ceviche preparation. He prefers traditional cuisine. The lobsters seem rather small, she noted an hour later. Perhaps we should have gone to the restaurant as originally planned. That tablecloth has wrinkles, she observed as I was plating the first course. Did you not ask housekeeping to press it properly? Each comment was designed to undermine my confidence, but for the first time, I let them roll off me without internalizing the criticism. I knew the meal was excellent. I knew the setting was beautiful. Patricia's opinion had lost its power over me. At 7 o'clock sharp, everyone gathered in the dining room. Elizabeth and Maxwell, William and his girlfriend Tiffany, Robert and Patricia and James, all dressed formally as I had requested. I had changed into a simple white dress that I had designed myself and asked a seamstress friend to create, Not a designer label from Patricia's approved list, but elegant in its simplicity. "This looks lovely, Heather," Elizabeth said with genuine surprise as she took in the candlelit table. "Did the staff help you arrange everything?" "I did it myself," I replied, with some guidance from Chef Antoine on the menu. The first two courses went surprisingly well. The food was delicious, and even Robert had to acknowledge the quality of the ceviche, though he attributed it to the chef's skill rather than mine. Conversation flowed more naturally than usual, perhaps because the setting was different from our normal family dinners. Then came the moment that would change everything. I brought out the main course. Perfectly cooked lobster with sides of coconut rice and local vegetables. I had arranged each plate carefully, adding edible flowers as a final touch. The presentation was stunning. Even Patricia couldn't find fault with it. After serving everyone else, I brought my own plate to the table and sat down in the empty chair between James and Elizabeth. I placed my napkin in my lap, took a breath, and prepared to enjoy the meal I had worked so hard to create. Patricia's voice cut through the momentary silence. "Heather, dear, what are you doing? The help doesn't eat with family." The table went completely still. I could hear the ceiling fan spinning above us and the distant sound of waves on the beach. Robert looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Elizabeth and William exchanged glances. Tiffany suddenly became very interested in her water glass. Maxwell cleared his throat but offered no comment. And James, my husband, my supposed partner, stared at his plate, avoiding eye contact with anyone. In that moment, everything crystallized. 3 years of slights, dismissals, and humiliations flashed through my mind. 3 years of James failing to stand up for me. 3 years of trying to earn a place at a table where I would never be welcome. I placed my fork down carefully and stood up slowly. Every eye was now on me, except for James, who still studied his lobster as if it contained the secrets of the universe. I looked directly at Patricia, making sure to meet her gaze fully before I spoke. My voice was steady, calm, and clear. "I'm not your maid. I'm not your help. I'm your daughter-in-law. Or at least I was. After tonight, I might not be either." The shock on Patricia's face was almost worth the 3 years of suffering. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. Perhaps the first time in her life, she found herself speechless. Without another word, I walked out of the dining room, head held high. Only when I reached the bedroom and closed the door behind me did I allow the tears to come. They weren't tears of sadness or defeat. They were tears of release. Something had broken inside me, but it needed to break for me to be free. I began packing methodically, pulling clothes from drawers and hanging spaces, no longer caring about wrinkles or proper folding techniques. As I worked, I called the front desk and arranged for another room for the night. I would not spend another minute in this villa pretending to be something I wasn't. 10 minutes later, there was a soft knock at the door. James entered without waiting for my response, his face a mixture of confusion and distress. "Heather, what are you doing? You can't just leave in the middle of dinner." "Watch me," I said, continuing to pack. "My mother didn't mean anything by it," he started, the familiar excuses already forming. "She was just surprised that you were sitting down. Usually when someone cooks, they serve, and then—" "Stop," I interrupted, turning to face him. "Just stop. She meant exactly what she said, and we both know it. She's never seen me as part of this family. None of them have. And the worst part is, neither have you." James looked stricken. "That's not true. I love you."
Do you?
"Because love includes respect, James. It includes standing up for your partner when they're being mistreated. It includes noticing when they're in pain." I zipped my suitcase closed with finality. "For 3 years, I've tried to be what your family wanted. I've changed how I dress, how I speak, how I behave. I've endured every cutting remark and backhanded compliment. I've smiled while being treated like an employee rather than a family member. And not once, James, have you truly stood up for me." The color drained from his face as my words hit home. For perhaps the first time, he was seeing the situation clearly, without the comfortable filter of denial. I didn't realize how bad it was," he said quietly. "I thought you were just being sensitive about their ways." "Their ways are elitist and cruel," I said. "And you've chosen them over me every single time." I picked up my suitcase and purse, moving toward the door. James stepped in front of me, panic in his eyes. Please don't go. We can fix this.
I'll talk to them.
I'll make them understand. The sad thing was, I believed he meant it in that moment. But intentions without actions had brought us to this point. I've booked another room for tonight, I said. I need space to think about whether this marriage is something I want to continue. Heather, please.
3 years, James.
3 years of being made to feel like I don't belong. Tonight was just the final straw. I stepped around him and walked out, not looking back. The resort staff was discreet as they escorted me to a beachfront suite on the opposite side of the property. Once alone, I called Ashley, who answered despite the late hour. I think my marriage might be over, I said when she picked up, my voice breaking for the first time since leaving the villa. Ashley listened as I recounted the evening's events, offering support without judgment. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you, she said. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. After we hung up, I sat on the balcony of my new room, watching the moonlight on the water. The same ocean I had cried beside days earlier now seemed to offer a different message, not one of despair, but of possibility. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe fully, no longer contorting myself to fit into the Anderson mold. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I made plans. The next morning, I met Sophia for breakfast at a small cafe away from the main resort areas. My eyes were puffy from crying, but I felt lighter than I had in years. Sophia took one look at me and signaled the waiter for coffee before I'd even sat down. Rough night, she asked without preamble. I gave her the condensed version of the previous evening's disaster. Rather than offering sympathy, she nodded with understanding. And now, she asked when I finished. Now I'm done diminishing myself to make other people comfortable, I said. I built a business from nothing. I have skills, intelligence, and determination. I don't need the Anderson name or approval to be successful. A slow smile spread across Sophia's face. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Now, let's talk about your next steps, both personal and professional. Over the next 2 hours, we outlined a comprehensive plan for scaling my jewelry business. Sophia offered to invest personally and to present my company to her venture capital firm's board. She believed we could triple production within 6 months and establish a flagship store within a year. As we were finishing our second pot of coffee, Sophia revealed something that would change the trajectory of my life. I mentioned the other day that Blue Diamond Resorts is in financial trouble, she said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. What I didn't mention is that I sit on the investment board that owns the controlling interest in the resort chain. We're looking to sell, and soon. I raised an eyebrow, not yet seeing how this connected to my situation. The resort needs new vision, Sophia continued. Someone who understands both luxury and the importance of treating people with respect. The current management is stuck in an outdated model of servility that doesn't work with today's workforce or clientele. She looked at me pointedly. Would you be interested in putting together an investment group to acquire Blue Diamond? With my backing and your vision, we could transform it into something truly special, a luxury resort where everyone, staff and guests alike, is treated with dignity. The idea was so unexpected that I laughed. Me? Buy the resort where the Andersons vacation every year? That's. And then it hit me. The perfect symmetry. The ultimate statement. Actually, I said slowly, I think that's exactly what I need to do. Sophia grinned. I thought you might see it that way. And don't worry about the Andersons knowing. We can structure the purchase through a holding company. They wouldn't know you're the new owner until you choose to reveal it. I returned to California separately from the Andersons the next day. James had texted and called repeatedly, but I maintained minimal contact, telling him I needed time to think. In truth, I needed space to implement the first phases of my plan without his knowledge. 2 weeks after returning home, I agreed to meet James for dinner. He looked terrible, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes. He reached for my hand across the table, and I allowed the contact, though it didn't affect me the way it once would have. I've missed you so much, he said. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and you were right about everything. I should have stood up for you. I should have put you first. It shouldn't have taken me walking out for you to realize that, I said quietly. James nodded, looking down. I know. I've been a coward. Taking the easy path with my family instead of being the husband you deserved. He took a deep breath. I've told my parents that things need to change. that they need to treat you with respect or they won't be part of our lives. I raised an eyebrow. And how did that go? About as well as you'd expect, he admitted. But I'm serious, Heather. I choose you. If they can't accept that, then that's their problem. Part of me wanted to believe him. The part that remembered how he'd helped me clean up broken champagne glasses at a charity gala. The part that had fallen in love with his kindness and humility before the Anderson family dynamics had reasserted themselves. I need more than words, James, I said finally. I need to see real change. Not just for a week or a month, but permanently. Anything, he promised. Whatever it takes. I'm moving forward with expanding my business, I told him. Sophia Grant is investing, and we're projecting significant growth in the next year. I need to know that you support that, not just when it's convenient, but all the time. James nodded eagerly. Of course. I'm proud of what you've built. I should have shown that more. And I need space from your family. No Sunday dinners, no holidays, no vacations. Not until they can demonstrate genuine respect. This was clearly harder for him to accept, but he agreed to this condition as well. There's one more thing, I said. I want us to see a marriage counselor. We have patterns that need to be addressed if we're going to move forward together. James agreed to everything. I didn't fully trust his promises, but I wasn't ready to end our marriage without giving him a chance to prove himself. Plus, I had my own plans in motion, plans that didn't depend on James or the Anderson family's approval. Over the next 6 months, I poured myself into 2 parallel tracks, rebuilding my marriage and building my business empire. The first was a slow, often painful process of couples therapy, honest conversations, and reestablishing trust. James left Anderson Investment Group to start his own consulting firm, a move that created significant tension with his family but demonstrated his commitment to our fresh start. The second track moved at breakneck speed. With Sophia's investment and guidance, my jewelry company expanded rapidly. We secured the department store distribution deal, launched an e-commerce platform, and opened a small flagship store in Los Angeles. I hired a team of talented artisans and managers, working 18-hour days to oversee every aspect of the growth. Alongside this visible business expansion, Sophia and I quietly executed our plan to acquire Blue Diamond Resort. We created a holding company called Phoenix Ventures, intentionally selecting a diverse board of directors with extensive hospitality experience. The negotiations were complex, but by the 4th month, we had a tentative agreement in place. During this period, I made a point of meeting with the resort's current manager, Mark Reynolds, without revealing my connection to the pending sale. I presented myself as a business owner interested in possibly hosting corporate retreats at the property. During our tour and conversation, I asked pointed questions about staff treatment, retention rates, and guest satisfaction metrics. Mark was candid about the challenges the resort faced. The owners are stuck in an outdated mindset, he confided. They believe luxury means subservience, but the best staff leave because of that attitude. And younger, wealthy clients want attentive service without the old-fashioned obsequiousness. What would you change if you could? I asked. His answer confirmed I was on the right track. I'd create a culture of mutual respect. Luxury can exist without hierarchy. In fact, guests have a better experience when staff feel valued and empowered. I left that meeting and called Sophia immediately. Mark stays. He gets it. By the 6th month, Phoenix Ventures had completed the acquisition of Blue Diamond Resort. The business press reported the sale as a strategic move by a new luxury hospitality group, with no mention of my involvement. The holding company structure ensured my name never appeared in any public documents. Working with Mark, we implemented subtle improvements to the resort's operations and philosophy. Nothing dramatic that would alert regular guests to the ownership change, just small shifts in staff policies, training, and guest interaction protocols. We added a respect and dignity clause to the employee handbook and guest terms, making it clear that mistreatment of staff would not be tolerated. Throughout this period, my relationship with James cautiously improved. He remained committed to our counseling sessions and supported my business expansion with genuine enthusiasm. He kept his promise about maintaining distance from his family, though I knew he spoke with them regularly by phone. Then came the inevitable moment. The annual Anderson family vacation booking request arrived at Blue Diamond Resort. Mark forwarded the email to me with a note. Annual booking from the Anderson family. Usual requests for special accommodations and staff preferences attached. How would you like to proceed? I smiled as I typed my response. Confirm the booking. Standard accommodations and service. No special treatment. The stage was set. 1 year after Patricia's fateful comment, I returned to Blue Diamond Resort, not as the tolerated outsider, but as the owner. The transformation in my life during that year was remarkable. My business had grown beyond even Sophia's ambitious projections, now valued in the 8 figures and featured in national business magazines. I had been invited to speak at industry conferences and had launched a foundation supporting women entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. My marriage had tentatively rebuilt on firmer ground. James had proven his commitment through consistent actions, standing by me as I built my business empire while developing his own independent consulting practice. He had maintained limited contact with his family, always prioritizing my comfort and refusing to attend events where I wasn't genuinely welcome. As our car approached the resort entrance, James squeezed my hand. Are you sure you want to do this? We could still back out, take a vacation somewhere else. I smiled, the secret knowledge warming me from within. I'm sure. It's time to face them on my terms. James had no idea about my ownership of the resort. I had kept that information compartmentalized, working with Sophia to ensure the acquisition remained confidential. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I wanted his reaction to be genuine when the moment of revelation came. The changes at Blue Diamond were subtle, but significant. The staff uniforms had been redesigned to be elegant but practical. The old formal script for greeting guests had been replaced with genuine, personalized welcomes. Small placards in each room outlined the resort's commitment to mutual respect between guests and staff. Patricia called the day before our arrival, not to speak with me but to confirm details with James. We've reserved the usual villa, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the speakerphone. Your father has arranged for the chef to prepare his special lobster bisque for the first night. Elizabeth and Maxwell arrive tomorrow morning, and William is bringing that new girlfriend, Brittany or Bethany, something like that. She paused before adding, We assume Heather is coming? The reservation includes her, of course. The grudging acknowledgement of my existence was Patricia's version of an olive branch. She hadn't apologized for her behavior the previous year. That would be too much to expect, but she had begun referring to me by name rather than as James's wife. Her name is Heather, Mother, James corrected firmly. And yes, we'll both be there. But we've booked our own accommodation this year, a beachfront suite rather than sharing the family villa. Patricia's disappointment was audible. She had been planning to reassert control through the shared living space. Our separate accommodations disrupted that strategy. When we arrived at the resort, I watched carefully as the staff greeted the Anderson family members who had already checked in. The difference from the previous year was striking. The greetings were professional and warm, but not subservient. There were no special flourishes for valued repeat guests, no excessive deference. Robert noticed immediately. The service has slipped, he muttered as we joined them for drinks on the terrace. That new staff member didn't even offer to carry Elizabeth's shopping bags. I didn't mind, Elizabeth said, surprising me. He was busy helping an elderly guest. It was actually refreshing not to be treated like I'm helpless. Patricia wasn't as adaptable. Throughout the afternoon, she made increasingly pointed comments about declining standards and the importance of proper training. When a server politely informed her that they no longer stocked the specific mineral water she preferred but offered several alternatives, Patricia looked personally offended. I've been coming here for 20 years, she said loudly. The previous management understood the importance of catering to loyal guests' preferences. The server maintained her composure. I apologize for the inconvenience, Mrs. Anderson. I'd be happy to make a note for future visits. In the meantime, would you like to try our locally sourced spring water? It's been rated among the best in the region. Patricia grudgingly accepted the alternative, but I could see her cataloging complaints for a future conversation with management. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. That evening, we gathered for dinner at the resort's signature restaurant. In previous years, the Andersons had always been seated at the best table on the terrace, often displacing other guests who had reserved that spot. This year, they were assigned an excellent table, but not their usual one. Patricia immediately summoned the maitre d'. There must be some mistake. The The Anderson family always sits at the corner table. The maitre d', a dignified man named Joseph who had worked at the resort for 15 years, smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Anderson, but that table was reserved weeks ago by another family celebrating their anniversary. We've given you our next best location with the same beautiful view." "This is unacceptable," Patricia insisted. "Please speak to the manager. We're not some random guests. We've been coming here for decades." Joseph maintained his professional demeanor. "Of course, Mrs. Anderson. I'll ask Manager Reynolds to stop by your table shortly. In the meantime, may I offer everyone a complimentary glass of champagne?" The gesture temporarily placated Patricia, but her dissatisfaction returned when she opened the menu. "Where is the special lobster preparation Robert always orders? It's not listed here." When Mark Reynolds arrived at the table, Patricia launched into a comprehensive list of complaints, from the table assignment to the menu changes to the mineral water situation. Mark listened attentively, showing genuine concern without the excessive apologies that had been standard procedure in previous years. "Mrs. Anderson, I understand these changes must be surprising after so many years," he said when she finally paused for breath. "Blue Diamond has undergone some updates in philosophy since our acquisition by new owners last year. We still provide the highest level of luxury and service, but we now focus on treating all guests with equal care and consideration." Robert, who had been largely silent, leaned forward. "New owners? What happened to Brighton Hospitality Group?" "Phoenix Ventures acquired the resort chain 8 months ago," Mark explained. "They've implemented some thoughtful improvements while maintaining the elements that make Blue Diamond special." "Well, I'd like to speak to someone from this Phoenix Ventures," Robert declared. "Some traditions shouldn't be discarded so casually. The Anderson name has carried weight here for 20 years. Mark nodded. "I understand, Mr. Anderson. As it happens, one of our owners is dining in the restaurant tonight. Let me see if they're available to address your concerns personally." As Mark walked away, Patricia looked triumphant. "Robert will straighten this out. He knows how to handle these situations." I excused myself to use the restroom, then slipped out a side door where Mark was waiting for me. "They're in rare form tonight," he said with a wry smile. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" I nodded. "It's perfect timing. How's the rest of the staff handling the Andersons?" "Professionally, just as we trained. No special treatment, but excellent service. Mrs. Anderson tried to demand that one of the housekeepers stay late to draw her bath, but Mariana politely explained our new staff scheduling policies. "Good," I said. "Give me 5 minutes, then come back to the table with me." When I returned to the dining room with Mark beside me, the Andersons were in the middle of discussing the declining standards and bizarre new policies of the resort. They fell silent as we approached. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson," Mark said formally, "I'd like to introduce one of the principal owners of Phoenix Ventures and Blue Diamond Resort, Heather Miller Anderson." The silence that followed was absolute. I could practically hear the gears turning in each of their minds as they processed this information. James's jaw literally dropped, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Patricia recovered first, her shock morphing quickly to disbelief, then anger. "This is absurd. Heather doesn't have the resources or experience to own a property like this." "Actually, Patricia," I said calmly, taking my seat again, "Phoenix Ventures is a partnership between myself and several other investors, including Sophia Grant, whom I met right here at this resort last year. We acquired Blue Diamond 8 months ago." Robert's businessman instincts kicked in, reassessing me with calculated interest. "That's quite an accomplishment," he said cautiously. "The resort must be valued at what, 100 million? 120, after our improvements," I confirmed. Elizabeth was staring at me, as if seeing me for the first time. "But why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you tell James?" I glanced at my husband, who was still processing the revelation. I wanted to make changes to the resort culture before revealing my involvement. Changes I thought were necessary based on my experiences here last year. "Changes that have ruined traditions that worked perfectly well," Patricia interjected. "The special treatment long-standing guests received was part of what made this place exclusive. Special treatment for some often comes at the expense of others," I replied evenly. "Our new policy is simple. Luxury for all guests, respect for all staff. No exceptions, no hierarchies." William, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, leaned forward. So, that new policy about guest behavior toward staff, that was your doing? I nodded. Every staff member here deserves to be treated with dignity. Guests who can't manage that basic courtesy are welcome to vacation elsewhere. You did all this because of what happened last year, Patricia said, realization dawning. Because of one little comment that you completely misinterpreted. It wasn't one comment, Patricia, I said, my voice steady. It was 3 years of subtle and not so subtle reminders that I would never be good enough to be a true Anderson. The comment about the help was just the final straw. I looked around the table, meeting each person's gaze. This isn't about revenge. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels valued, where wealth doesn't entitle anyone to treat others as lesser beings. James finally found his voice. You bought the resort. Without telling me. I did, I acknowledged. It was a business decision initially, but also a personal one. I needed to prove something to myself, that I could transform a negative experience into something positive. The rest of the dinner proceeded in strained conversation. Robert peppered me with questions about the acquisition structure and financing, his attitude shifting from dismissal to reluctant respect. Elizabeth asked thoughtful questions about the changes to staff policies. William seemed genuinely impressed, while his girlfriend Tiffany watched the family dynamics with fascinated horror. Patricia maintained a frigid silence, broken only by occasional barbed comments about new money and lack of tradition. After dinner, James and I walked along the beach in silence until we reached a secluded cove. I should be angry that you kept this from me, he finally said. But mostly I'm just in awe. You really did this. You bought the entire resort. I did. I confirmed. With help from Sophia and other investors. But the vision for transforming it was mine. It's incredible, he said, shaking his head. And I had no idea. All those late nights you said were about expanding the jewelry line. Many of them were. That business has grown tremendously too. But yes, some were about this project. James stopped walking and turned to face me. I'm sorry I didn't see your potential sooner. I'm sorry I let my family make you feel less than. You are extraordinary, Heather. For the first time in our marriage, I felt James truly saw me. Not as an accessory to his life or a charity case he'd rescued from middle-class obscurity, but as a powerful, capable woman in my own right. The next morning, Patricia and Robert announced they would be cutting their vacation short, citing business obligations in New York. The real reason was obvious. Patricia couldn't handle the shift in power dynamics. Her carefully constructed hierarchy had been upended, and rather than adapt, she chose to retreat. Before they left, Robert pulled me aside for a private word. That was quite a power move, he said, his tone a mixture of irritation and reluctant admiration. Buying a man's favorite resort out from under him. It was a business opportunity, I replied. The fact that it also made a personal statement was a bonus. Robert studied me for a moment. You know, if you'd shown this kind of strategic thinking earlier, I might have offered you a position at Anderson Investment. I prefer building my own legacy, but thank you for the belated recognition. He nodded, then extended his hand. Well played, Heather. Patricia won't admit it, but you've earned my respect. It wasn't an apology, but from Robert Anderson, it was the closest thing I would ever get to one. 6 months after the revealing vacation at Blue Diamond Resort, I hosted a dinner party at the new home James and I had purchased, a modern architectural masterpiece on the California coast that reflected both our tastes rather than Anderson family traditions. The guest list included James's family, my parents, Ashley and her husband, and Sophia Grant. It had taken significant persuasion to get Patricia to attend. She had maintained minimal contact since the resort revelation, sending formal birthday and holiday acknowledgments, but avoiding direct interaction. The power shift in our relationship had been too dramatic for her to process gracefully. As I welcomed guests, I was struck by how differently I carried myself now. The nervous, eager-to-please woman who had once desperately sought the Andersons' approval was gone. In her place stood someone confident in her worth, unafraid to set boundaries and expectations. Patricia arrived last, Robert guiding her with a hand at her elbow. She had aged visibly in the past year, the strain of adjusting to new family dynamics etched in the tightness around her mouth. But she had made the effort to come, which was a start. Lovely home, she said stiffly as I took her coat. Very modern. From Patricia, this constituted a generous compliment. Thank you for coming, I replied sincerely. It means a lot to James and to me. Dinner conversation was carefully neutral at first. Business developments, Elizabeth's pregnancy announcement, William's new position at a rival investment firm. My parents, who had driven in from Ohio for the occasion, added warmth and unpretentious charm to the gathering. Dad's stories about the diner and Mom's genuine interest in everyone's lives gradually thawed the atmosphere. After dessert, as everyone moved to the living room for coffee, Patricia approached me in the kitchen where I was arranging a tray of petit fours. You've done well for yourself, she said abruptly. The business, the resort, this house. It's impressive. Coming from Patricia, this was tantamount to a groveling apology. I accepted it in the spirit intended. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. I may have been harsh in my judgment of you initially. I was protecting our family legacy. I understand that, I said carefully. But family isn't about protecting a legacy, Patricia. It's about supporting each other, celebrating each other's successes rather than feeling threatened by them. Patricia nodded slightly, not quite agreeing but acknowledging the point. James seems happy. Happier than when he was at the firm.
He is.
His consulting practice lets him use his skills without the family pressure. He's building something that's truly his. We stood in silence for a moment, years of tension between us slowly beginning to dissolve. Not completely. Some wounds were too deep for that, but enough to glimpse a possible future where we could interact with mutual respect, if not warmth. I'll never be the daughter-in-law you wanted, I said finally. And you'll never be the mother-in-law I hoped for. But we can establish boundaries that allow us to be family without hurting each other. Patricia considered this, then nodded once decisively. I believe we can try. It wasn't a Hollywood reconciliation with tears and hugs, but it was real, a pragmatic acknowledgement that we would remain in each other's lives and needed to find a workable path forward. Over the next year, my business empire continued to expand. The jewelry line became an international brand, and Blue Diamond Resorts flourished under the new management philosophy. I launched a foundation to support first-generation entrepreneurs, particularly women from working-class backgrounds like my own. James and I found a new equilibrium in our marriage. The power dynamics had shifted permanently. He now proudly introduced himself as Heather Miller's husband at events, but our bond had deepened through the challenges we'd weathered. The annual Anderson family vacation tradition continued, but at different properties within the Blue Diamond Resort collection. I made a point of joining for part of each trip, establishing new traditions based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. Elizabeth became an unexpected ally, impressed by my business acumen and approaching me for advice on investments of her own. William developed a grudging respect, occasionally consulting with me on business matters. Robert treated me as an equal in professional contexts, though he would likely never feel genuine warmth toward me. And Patricia? She tried in her limited way. She still occasionally made comments that revealed her ingrained elitism, but she caught herself more often than not, making visible efforts to adapt to the new reality. My journey from outsider to power player had taught me invaluable lessons, that true worth comes from within, not from others' validation, that standing up for yourself isn't selfish but necessary, that success is the best response to those who underestimate you. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes you don't need a seat at someone else's table. You need to build your own table and invite people who value you to join. As I watch the sunset from the deck of the newest Blue Diamond Resort property, I think about that pivotal moment a year and a half ago when Patricia's casual cruelty shattered my illusions. In that painful breaking, I found the strength to rebuild myself, not as an Anderson appendage, but as Heather Miller, entrepreneur, leader, and woman who knows her worth. If you've ever been made to feel less than, if you've ever dimmed your light to make others comfortable, remember this. Your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it. Sometimes the greatest gift others can give you is underestimating you, because proving them wrong will lead you to heights you never imagined possible. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against people who underestimated you? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and transformation, and share with someone who might need this message today. Remember, Your worth is inherent, not granted by others, but recognized by you. Thank you for joining me on this journey.